was the Queen for a very long time. And although you kind of know that this might happen, you don't really think about it very much. Not least of all because
For years, rumors have swirled about tension inside the royal family. Princess Anne has always kept her thoughts private, especially about Camilla. However, now, after 15 years, she's finally speaking out. What she reveals is shocking and sheds light on secrets long kept hidden. This could change how people see Camilla forever. What was the secret? What happened to Camilla after King Charles heard about her plans? The unexpected recording. On April 9, 2005, Camilla and Charles planned to get married. They wanted it to be a beautiful event, and for the most part, the day turned out great. It was a spring morning outside Camilla's window. Little birds chirped happily as if they understood how joyful the soon-to-be bride felt. As per royal order, the chapel bell rang in harmony with military music, and Windsor Castle was packed with royals and other dignitaries who were present to witness the occasion. Outside the castle, you could see a line of cars, all trooping into the event the press had long rumored about. While some were genuinely excited, others were curious about the wedding. It wasn't the usual royal love story they were used to. Although the wedding of Charles and Camilla raised questions about tradition, the couple was happy. They walked down the hall in radiant smiles and whispered into each other's ears like little kids. For close members of the royal family, you could tell something was different. While the newlyweds seemed to be in their world, the atmosphere was tense. Princess Anne, in a simple beige coat, walked in. Although her face gave no emotions, her cold eyes held emotions that were clear to everyone. William and Harry walked in with tensed faces, but they kept a friendly smile that had many underlying emotions. The other relatives had a calm look that showed that they were being cautious. They started revealing they had questions on their minds, but no one dared to ask. Behind closed doors in the dressing room, Camilla stood. Her eyes gleamed with victory as she stared blankly into space. She suddenly chuckled softly and then gave a sinister smile. She had the look of someone who was about to achieve what she had plotted for years. There was no nervousness. Colin Styles, one of the royal servants who had worked with the family for over 30 years, entered with a small booklet. He was there to report the schedule for the day and ensure Camilla didn't miss a moment on her special day. In his hands were a notebook and a pocket recorder that he often used as a reminder so he didn't forget anything. In the rush, he accidentally pressed a button on the recorder. It wasn't to turn it off, it was the opposite. It was turned on. Colin went on with his errands for the day. "Only 20 minutes left, ma'am." He bowed slightly. Camilla took a swift turn, walked to the table and picked a glass of wine. She took a sip, not to calm her nerves. She wasn't scared to the point of being worried about anything. She just couldn't believe she was minutes away from achieving everything she had planned. The smile on her face vanished, replaced by a cold stare. Although Colin stood there glued, he was not surprised by her expression. He was used to this, and he never thought the wedding would change anything. However, the words Camilla said took him by surprise. "Do you know why I am entering this family?" Although she asked calmly, her words carried a heavy weight. "I'm not doing it for the lavish ceremonies and events. It's certainly not for love. It's because I want the secrets that hide in these stone rooms. They are my power, and once I have them all, no one in this royal family can touch me." Camilla didn't stop there. She said 6 words that changed the entire atmosphere. "All this power will be mine." Colin raised his head and moved uncomfortably. He was stunned by her statement, but Camilla seemed unconcerned. She went back to adjusting her dress so she could prepare for her big day. Colin thought he had heard all of it, but Camilla had more coming. She began speaking about King Charles. "He is my access to all the files and important documents. Once I lay my hands on everything, this royal family will belong to me. Those who seem to have opinions will have to watch silently." Camilla wasn't worried that anyone would hear her. The music from the background was loud, but that did not put Colin at ease. He wanted to leave the room quickly. He didn't want to hear more from Camilla. He asked if there was anything else he could do for her, and hurriedly stepped out when she didn't require his service. All the while, Camilla's statements were captured on the recorder. Nothing was left out, and Colin was about to find out after a long day with wedding errands. He retired to his room. He brought out the recorder and tried to delete the insignificant thing it must have picked up while he was running errands. That's when he got the shock. There it was, Camilla's words. He couldn't sleep that night. He thought long and hard about whether to delete the recording or expose the secret to someone in the royal family. He never meant to record her conversation. He had no way of knowing what intentions Camilla had. Like everyone, he thought she was marrying for love. Wasn't that the reason she stayed back throughout the years and never left King Charles, even when they were both married? All these questions would have been raised only by people who were aware of Camilla's plans, but no one else knew about them. They all just believed she was madly in love and ready to pursue it, even if that meant she had to defile public standards. How wrong they were. Camilla had a feeling Colin would tell on her. She couldn't let that happen. She wanted her secret buried deep under the cold ground. She never wanted anyone to hear about it. If she had her way, she would have taken Colin out of the way. She thought long and hard about it, but decided against it. Camilla knew it would raise too many questions, and the last thing she wanted was for thinking to blow up in her face. She also knew she was too anxious, and in that moment, she could take a wrong step that would sabotage her efforts. She couldn't let that happen. She thought, I have worked too hard and I have come a long way. I can't let him destroy everything I've set in place. There is no way I'm going to allow that. I must make sure he never says a word to anyone. Colin was burdened with the truth. The next day, he received a call from Camilla. She invited him into her study. As Colin approached the door of her office, he was unsettled. He opened the doors and walked in. There she was, in a corner, staring as he squirmed under her gaze. I know you heard what I said yesterday. I want you to keep your mouth shut and I will help you. I know you have a sick daughter who is on expensive medication. I also know the banks are about to take your house. I could help you with that. However, you must not speak about what you heard with anyone. Colin could not believe he was being threatened. He had no choice and accepted her offer. For 15 years, he kept silent and worked in fear. During this time, Camilla's influence grew, and her quest for power drove her to take some measures. She took off her old staff, and unfortunately, Colin was one of them. It was clear she no longer had use for him. She had mainly achieved her goals and planned to make a power move with King Charles. Anne, who had been watching in the shadows, swore never to let that happen. She decided to do some digging before things got out of hand. They already had, but if she could do something to stop it, then she was willing. She began asking questions, and Colin's name was mentioned. He had long left the palace, but she got her sources to find him, and she visited him. Colin was surprised to see the princess. They went into a conversation, and he shared everything he knew. He wanted to let go of the burden he had carried for years. He opened a locked drawer and pulled out the recorder. He handed it to the princess and asked her to play it. Princess Anne knew Camilla was wild, but she couldn't believe her ears. She began her plans to halt the madness. Camilla thought she had it under control, with Colin terrorized with fear. She believed she had shut the door on anyone finding out. She became complacent about it and never thought that her worst enemy would catch on. Just when she was finally sitting in the helm of affairs and enjoying the power grasp, the skeletons in her cupboard were revealed. A nightmare from the past unexpectedly resurfaced, and it was more terrifying. Princess Anne had Camilla's secret. She was one royal that could not be taken for granted. If Camilla managed to silence the other royals, she knew it would be impossible to do the same with Anne. They never saw eye to eye because the princess was never afraid to give her opinions about Camilla's presence in the royal family. She set up a council meeting and exposed the recording. The room felt silent after they heard Camilla's words. They knew it was the worst kind of betrayal, and she would face judgment. Camilla was glued to her seat. She couldn't believe that her secret was out. There was nothing she could do. She could no longer play on King Charles's intelligence. It was over. After a meeting to decide her fate, she was relegated to a closed chamber and temporarily asked to leave the palace. Camilla was relieved of her duties and reduced to nothing. At that moment, she knew she had underestimated Princess Anne. How wrong she was to believe that Anne could do nothing to her. Who is Princess Anne? What position does she hold in the royal family? How powerful is she? The birth of a royal. It was a bright summer day in London when Princess Anne was born. The date was August 15th, 1950. After the Second World War, people were slowly trying to rebuild their lives. But in Buckingham Palace, something very special was happening. Queen Elizabeth, then still Princess Elizabeth, welcomed her second child. This baby girl was named Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise. She came into the world as a princess, born right into the heart of the royal family. Anne's father was Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. He was a strong man with a stern face but a heart full of care for his family. He had been born into Greek and Danish royalty, but gave up everything to be by Elizabeth's side. Anne's mother, Princess Elizabeth, later became Queen Elizabeth II, a name that echoed in history for many, many years. At the time of Anne's birth, her brother Charles was just a little boy. He was born in November 1948, making him about 2 years older than his sister. The two grew up in a world that most children could never imagine. They were surrounded by gold-painted walls, grand halls, guards in red uniforms, and strict rules that must be adhered to. For little Anne, growing up in the royal family meant she never had a moment alone without someone watching. Every move she made, every word she spoke, was seen or heard by someone. Even when she was just a baby, there were expectations placed on her, rules on smiling and waving. She had to look neat and put together at all times. Despite the rules, she had a lovely family. Her mother was often busy with royal duties. Her father was strict, but there were moments when Anne got to be a child, laughing and playing with Charles and her father. Although the two siblings were close in age, they were very different. Charles was shy, thoughtful, and often quiet. Anne, on the other hand, was bold, curious, and full of energy. Even at a young age, people said she had a spark in her eye, like she knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. As time went on, more family members joined. Anne had 2 younger brothers, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, but they came much later. Anne was already growing into a young girl when Andrew arrived in 1960, followed by Edward in 1964. Due to the age gap, Anne and Charles had already formed their bond, while the younger boys were still toddlers. Anne's early days were filled with lessons, formal tea times, and long hours learning how to behave like a royal. However, behind the scenes, she was just a little girl. She liked ponies, enjoyed running outdoors, and loved feeling free. The stables at Windsor Castle became her happy place. Whenever Anne could sneak away from her royal lessons, she would run to the horses. The horses didn't care if she was a princess. They didn't ask her to sit still or smile for pictures. They just let her be herself. Even though the world saw Anne as a royal figure, deep inside, she was a girl trying to find her place in a family that came with a crown. She admired her mother and looked up to her father, but their lives were filled with so many duties. Many times, Anne and Charles were left in the care of nannies and tutors, who taught them everything from history to table manners. But no matter how polished things looked on the outside, Anne often felt the pressure of being part of the royal family. To many people outside the palace walls, Anne had everything: fancy dresses, big homes, and endless attention. However, Anne didn't always feel that way. She saw how hard her parents worked. She noticed how heavy the crown seemed on her mother's head. Even as a child, she understood that being royal was a sacrifice. It wasn't easy. It meant giving up many of the things. Yet, Anne did not shrink from her path. She didn't always follow what was expected. The princess had her own thoughts and knew her worth. She had a voice and wasn't afraid to use it. While the world expected her to be like a doll on a shelf, she decided she would be something different, something real. Anne's early years had a profound impact on her that most people were unaware of. Born into royalty, surrounded by tradition and duty, she quietly studied the world around her. She watched her parents, learned from her brother, and found comfort in the quiet company of horses. Even though she was a princess by birth, she was already becoming a woman who would define her own way of being royal. It was only the beginning of her journey. From the golden halls of the palace to the muddy grounds of the stables, little Anne was not just growing up. She was preparing to become someone the world would never forget. The duty of a royal, Anne understood the role from early on. Life in the royal family was like a grand show, yet she was never in need of the spotlight, even when she was the center of attention. Unlike some publicity seekers, Anne preferred backstage. The world was changing around her as she grew up. Women were beginning to raise their voices, demanding justice and liberty. However, within the walls of the palace, tradition still prevailed. Girls were encouraged to sit straight and only speak when spoken to, and never express their emotions or opinions. Anne never liked rules, and it wasn't because they were old. She didn't generally like regulations. She was a busy woman. She was tutored in languages, history, and art. She was taught to learn French, horsemanship, and to walk. She attended Benenden School, a private girls' boarding school in Kent, England. Though many expected that she would receive a light and proper education, Anne was serious about her studies. She didn't just want to be a princess, she wanted to be a person who knew. She tried to think and act on her own. However, it didn't matter how much she learned or how well she behaved, there were always eyes on her. It is one of the most difficult things about being royal. There were guards, cameras, and whispers. If she smiled, she was courteous, they commented. If she did not, they said she was impolite. If she were silent, they would accuse her of being frigid. If she expressed her opinion, she was audacious. It was like walking through a maze of mirrors. You had no idea how the world reflected you. Anne's life was not simple. While other girls played with dolls, Anne found her strength in horses. For her, it's why she enjoyed being in the stables. She loved the power of the horses, their quiet eyes, the way they listened without judging. On horseback, she experienced a sense of freedom. She had to act as if she were in no position, and it mattered little what her title was. On a horse, she was just Anne. She loved how they helped her become fast, focused, and fierce. She began competing in events, a highly demanding three-phase contest of dressage, cross-country, and show jumping. It wasn't like a hobby. For Anne, it was love. However, life as a royal child wasn't all equestrian endeavors and shiny shoes. It was a challenge. It was difficult being apart from her parents. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip made appearances worldwide. They could be seen traveling, in meetings, or waving from balconies. This meant Anne and her siblings were not taken. Yes, they had nannies and teachers, but it wasn't like having a mother to tuck you in every night, or a father who tells you stories. Anne learned to be strong for herself because it was her only choice. There were many times when people wished for Anne to remain silent, to smile, and to nod agreeably when she did not. However, she had feelings. She paid attention and asked questions that made people squirm. She wasn't trying to stir up problems. She just hated pretense. It was something that many people in the royal circle were unsure how to handle. Anne attended events, shook hands, and smiled at the camera, but never allowed the royal title to define her. She struggled and fought for something other than an inheritance to her crown. By mid-teens, Anne was already finding a place for herself in the royal family. She did not always support tradition, but she did not forsake her place. She transformed it instead. She was direct and focused. She answered the foolish questions posed by reporters, and she answered them intelligently. She politely acknowledged the crowds, but never got caught up in them. Anne was steady, and eventually people began to notice. People interpreted her gestures as rudeness. She was perceived as cold because she didn't shed tears on camera or show any emotional response. She was never one for showing affection, but she cared in a way that ran deeper than most. She was quiet in her ways of showing it. She didn't require an audience to perform her duties. Despite being strong and fierce, she also struggled like a girl her age. She had to deal with doubt, curiosity, and pressure, but Anne had to endure all of this under public scrutiny. The way she wore a dress, what she said at a meeting, and how she looked at a man was news, but she remained down to earth. She didn't impersonate anybody else. She was real, and that was rare in the royal family. Her bond with her siblings was another significant factor in her path. Nonetheless, with Charles, the connection was always present. The burden of the crown altered it. Charles would one day be king with his own set of rules. With her younger brothers, Andrew and Edward, the age gap between them often made her feel like the responsible older sister. She allowed her brothers to see a little more of the world than they should have. Through it all, Anne became a confident woman. She was not after fame or money. She pursued purpose. She worked hard, loved hard, and did not allow herself to be taken advantage of. She was royal, yes, but also brave. Princess Anne was, by adulthood, a person who drew attention. She was more than just the queen's daughter. She was a game changer. Beyond royalty. When Anne embraced adulthood, many believed they already had a sense of who she was. The bold and fearless daughter of the queen, Anne, who waved royally and grimaced, telling the press to get lost, had a calm heart underneath the cold expressions. She had a passion and a dream, and one of them was love. But as a royal, love came with rules. You couldn't just fall in love with anyone. There was a process to everything. Nothing escaped the thirsty media men who were desperate for any news on the royals. Their camera was always in sight. No step went unnoticed, no relationship undeclared, no smile unphotographed. However, Anne did not wait for fairy tales. She wasn't the kind who dreamed of glass slippers or perfect-haired princes. What she really wanted was somebody who understood her and would respect her space. Someone who liked horses, enjoyed hard work, and preferred a quiet existence. By the early 1970s, her heart was set on Mark Phillips, an equestrian. He was not a royal, but he had a good name and a healthy presence. Mark was tall, serene, and intensely focused. More importantly, he was as knowledgeable about the horse world as she was. That was uncommon. Both of them were equestrians and enjoyed the sport. It was that shared love that brought them together. Not fame, not titles, just horses. There were no fireworks or crazy headlines in their courtship. It was just as quiet, practical, and thoughtful as Anne. In May of 1973, when they announced their engagement, congregants were thrilled, but Anne was unfazed. She didn't drool over bridal gowns and grand receptions. Her focus was on what the marriage meant, not how it appeared. Princess Anne and Phillips married on November 14, 1973, at Westminster Abbey. The ceremony was televised and viewed worldwide by millions. Crowds filled the streets, but amid all of the clamor and partying, Anne's face remained constant. That's just how she was. Marriage was not a performance for her. Of course, she was happy, but she knew it was a lot of work. They relocated to Gatcombe Park, a country home that had been a gift from the Queen. It wasn't a palace of glitter. It was in a peaceful, cozy home, surrounded by fields ideal for horses, dogs, and a life away from cameras. Anne had wanted to avoid raising her future children in royal apartments. She wished them to run free and have a normal childhood. Just a few years later, in 1977, Anne gave birth. She also delivered the Queen's first grandchild, Peter Phillips. In 1981, she had a daughter, Zara Phillips. Anne and Mark saw no reason to make Peter or Zara official forms. That was Anne's decision. She felt that children needed to make their own lives, not bear a title they hadn't chosen. Peter and Zara attended regular schools and led relatively normal lives, as much as royal grandchildren could at any rate. Anne would herself take them to school. She cooked for them, made sure they knew how to work hard and stay grounded. She didn't want them to grow up expecting the world to bow to them. It wasn't the kind of parent she wanted to be. While Anne tried to build a peaceful home life, her marriage to Mark was falling apart. From the outside, they looked like a perfect couple, both focused, athletic, and steady. Inside, they drifted apart. Mark was often away for work or events, and their bond slowly began to fade. There were long moments of silence, busy schedules, and different goals. They weren't angry with each other, just no longer close. In 1992, after almost 20 years of marriage, Princess Anne and Mark Phillips officially divorced. It wasn't a scandal full of drama. It was quiet, much like their courtship. They had grown apart, and they both knew it. Anne didn't hide in sadness. She simply accepted what had happened and moved forward, but love wasn't done with her just yet. In December 1992, Anne married Timothy Lawrence, a Royal Navy officer. Their relationship had quietly grown over time. Timothy was calm, kind, and deeply respectful of Anne's independence. He didn't try to outshine her or control her. He stood beside her quietly and consistently, and that meant everything. Their wedding was small, held in Scotland, with only close family in attendance. No giant fanfare, no royal carriages. It was precisely what Anne wanted, sincere and straightforward. With Timothy, she found something different from her first marriage, a partnership built on understanding, privacy, and deep respect. Anne's children, Peter and Zara, grew up into strong, independent adults just as she hoped. Peter became a businessman, and Zara became an Olympic silver medalist in equestrian sports. Just like her mother, Zara loved horses more than crowds. She took her mother's fire and calmness and turned it into gold, or in this case, silver. Today, Princess Anne is a grandmother too. She has several grandchildren who call her Granny, though she's still often seen in boots, walking fast, getting things done. She doesn't slow down easily. Even now, into her 70s, Anne remains one of the hardest working royals. She attends hundreds of events a year, travels far and wide, and speaks her mind when it matters. Her love life might not have followed the royal script. There were no fairy tales, no picture-perfect love stories, but there was courage. Anne made her own path in love, marriage, and motherhood. She didn't try to be everyone's favorite. She didn't chase applause. Instead, she built a life full of meaning, away from the glitter but filled with gold. The kind of gold you can't see, only feel. Through all of it, the ups, the downs, the joys and the trials, Princess Anne has remained one thing above all, herself, strong, grounded, and real. It's why Camilla couldn't see her coming. It's why she was caught off guard. Princess Anne will always put the royal family first and fish out all traitors. What do you think about Camilla and her secrets? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.